Hi, I'm Suhayl Saadi and I'm the author of The Malt Kiln. 4 walls, the darkness and mark, a wall for each year, and every day weighed on her like sand, like soil. Yet it was better to live in the grit of the earth and not to see the fractures. There were no mirrors in her flat. Frosted windows and beautiful prints, sandpapered bath taps, no mirrors. And here in the kiln, everything was matte black. "This'll help you to dance," he said, though she wasn't sure how she managed to hear his voice over the music as he placed something in her palm, a tiny blue flying saucer emblazoned with the hologram of the head of a jester. The place swarmed with the unutterably slim. Laura held the joker close. She'd half anticipated a degree of animation, but then she reminded herself that this was Hogmanay, New Year's Eve. And like everything to do with Eve, it was empty. Mark's tongue darted in and out, and then he swallowed a handful. She resisted the temptation to smooth down her flanks, and instead let the music swirl around her. Dark breaks of chemical beat mixed in with longer phases of lounge core, while every so often a flash of speed garage would race through the retro jungle ambience and emerge in a wodge of rampant thumping house. Like the people, the music fluxed and yet stayed the same. But music had never been a slave. She closed her eyes, bit down on the face of the jester, and the beat was in her head. The club was right on the riverbank and once had been a malt kiln, and after a while Laura found she was able to conjure up the 200-year-old mathematics of its original structure as a dolphin might conjure up the architectures of the sea. The kiln had a bell tower which seemed to have been constructed of an older stone altogether, and it was rumoured that before the kiln, on this site, there had been a monastery. Mark had disappeared. Her comptroller, her lover who regulated every glance and modulated each expression. With iron obedience, she'd orbited around him for so long she'd almost forgotten what it had felt like before, when the dark waters had been hers alone. She looked around, and though the house had turned deep and murky, she thought she saw him amongst a huddled group of skin dancers, yet she felt unsure of how long she'd had her eyes closed. The club had begun to sway. Its star-shaped blackness swirled around in a freestyle mess. People had become mixed up with objects and the stems of notes, with the dim, secreted lights that flashed in G minor from the walls. But now, and in the club, it was always now, she danced alone, like everyone else. And yet, she found that touch and image did not align. That walls, tables, air, people, all held the same fluctuating substance. She could not see herself as she leapt and dived, yet she felt her skin royal. And as though she were her own lover, she began to enjoy the lean suppleness of her musculature, the fine touch of her banshee hair. The chamber was a stomach, a womb, and it disgorged, consumed, and disgorged again, and it was her womb, childless, motherless, bloodless. Or perhaps it was the empty, shrunken cavity of her own mother, the blazing schizo whose lunacy now was compressed like celluloid into the Jacqueton's house, the bread of disgust which pumped from Laura's body, ferro-fucking moan. At certain points on the dance floor, immersed in luminescent waterfalls, people momentarily would appear stark naked. The beams swept around, coalescing and fragmenting in a repetitive cycle, gathering up dancers as though they were bees. They would whirl on the spot, bodies glistening, hair swirling, nostrils flared. There was neither beginning nor end. Everything was permissible. Perhaps, thought Laura, it is the others who are deluded, the ones outside the beat, the fools who would hold hands and carry burning torches through this night. Sing songs for Auld Lang Syne, for Rabbie Burns, the randy farmer, lover of rodents and witches. This world. She had not eaten for days, it seemed. Sometimes she would imagine becoming a self-sufficient being, a straight line, or possibly a dot. But she was seeing spots, lines, zigzags. Fuck! Laura spun at the fulcrum of the star with its 7 corridors, each of which carried the dancers into carbon black. She planted her soles wide and fixated on a table leg, attempted to shut out everything else, intoned the words, "Fat bitch, fat bitch, fat bitch." Slowly, her vertigo began to settle, and she was able to walk to the low table, at which, carefully, she sat down. Thanks very much, Words per Minute.